Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Deep Dive. We're going to be taking a look at some of the biggest stories here in Southern California this week. We've got a lot to cover from retail closures that could actually change how you do your holiday shopping to a Chargers game that had us all holding our breath, plus some key election updates you definitely don't want to miss. So get ready. It's time to get informed.
What's really interesting is that these stories might seem kind of random at first glance, but they actually connect to some big trends that are impacting communities, not just here in Southern California, but across the U.S.
So first up, let's talk about this whole retail apocalypse thing I keep hearing about. I was reading an article in the Observer Group newspapers of Southern California, and they said over 2,000 stores are closing down this year. That's a lot, especially with
Hmm.
Black Friday right around the corner. Does this mean the end of, actually going to stores?
Well, it's definitely not just a random thing. This wave of closures is really a symptom of some pretty big changes in the way we shop these days. And the economic pressures that businesses are facing. I mean, even giants like Walmart are closing some stores while they're opening others in areas they think will be more profitable. It's like a giant game of chess with real world consequences.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it's still kind of sad to see those going out of business signs everywhere. The article mentioned pharmacies and restaurants are closing too. Even Denny's is shutting down some spots.
Yeah, and the impact goes way beyond just being inconvenient. These closures can actually create what are called food deserts, particularly in underserved communities. Like, take the Aurora Market in DC, for example. This was a family-owned store that had to close because of theft. Now, people in that neighborhood lost a vital resource for getting groceries and essential items. Think about it. What would it be like if your local grocery store just suddenly shut down?
Man, I can't even imagine. That'd be way more than just an inconvenience, that's for sure.
Absolutely. It's about more than just convenience. These local stores are often like the heart of their communities. There was a quote from a veteran store owner in the article that really stuck with me. They said, "Stores like ours aren't just businesses, they're part of the community fabric. When they close, it leaves a void that's hard to fill." So while experts are predicting even more closures, like maybe as many as 45,000 in the next 5 years, it's not all doom and gloom.
Wait, 45,000? Really? Wow, that's a crazy number. So if there's more closures coming, what's the good news here?
Well, while we're seeing those smaller businesses struggle, the big players like Costco, Target, and Home Depot are actually expanding. It's kind of like a David versus Goliath situation.
That is a great way to put it. It really makes you think about where you choose to spend your money.
For sure. Maybe this is a wake up call for all of us to be more mindful about our shopping habits and make a conscious effort to support those local businesses that make our communities unique. What do you think?
I totally agree. It's so easy to just click buy online, but sometimes we forget about the real people and businesses behind those products. Speaking of competition and high stakes, did you catch that Chargers game on Sunday night? The Bengals really gave them a run for their money.
Oh man, it was a total nail biter. The Observer Group newspapers of Southern California really captured the drama of that game. Both teams were playing with their playoff hopes on the line, so the energy was intense.
Totally. The Chargers were totally dominating that first half, but then bam, the Bengals came back with a vengeance in the second. I really thought they were going to lose for a minute there.
Yeah, if McPherson hadn't missed those field goals, that was a huge break for the Chargers.
Oh, for sure. Talk about a turning point. But Herbert and Dobbins really stepped up to pull off that win in the final minute.
It was a massive win for them. They're now 7-3, just 2 games behind the Chiefs.
Yeah, things are getting interesting in the AFC West. And speaking of high-pressure situations, let's shift gears and talk about something that affects all of us: elections. I was reading a piece in California Black Media about Secretary of State Weber's update on the ballot counting process here in California. It seems like they're really focused on accuracy and making sure that every single vote is counted.
Absolutely. California is really unique in that way. They have those extended voting periods and really go the extra mile to verify every single vote, which is why it sometimes takes longer to get the final results compared to other states.
So it's all about accuracy, even if it takes a little extra time.
Precisely. But with over 22.5 million registered voters and a lot of manual processes, like signature verification, it's a massive undertaking.
Wow, 22.5 million. That's a ton of ballots to process.
Yeah.
Hearing all of that, do you ever worry about the possibility of things going wrong? Like, fraud or errors or anything like that?
Not really. California has all sorts of safeguards in place to prevent that kind of thing. They do hand counts, test their machines rigorously, and have a really transparent process overall.
Okay, that makes me feel better. So what's the key takeaway here for our listeners?
Well, I think the big message is to be patient. Your vote matters, and California is working hard to make sure that it's counted accurately. Democracy takes time, and that's a good thing.
That's a great point. Now let's switch gears to something else that's incredibly important. Healthcare. I came across another article in California Black Media and had a pretty shocking statistic.
Oh, are you talking about the one about the lack of black doctors in California?
That's the one. Apparently only 3% of doctors in California are black.
It's a sobering statistic for sure.
Hmm.
And while it's actually a slightly higher percentage than the national average, which is 5%, it still highlights how much work still needs to be done to address this issue.
Exactly. And it's not just about numbers, it's about representation and having doctors who understand the needs of diverse communities. Organizations like the California Black Health Network, or CBHN, and Charles R. Drew, University of Medicine and Science, are really stepping up to address this problem.
They're doing incredible work. Studies have actually shown that having black doctors can lead to better health outcomes for black communities. It really makes you wonder why there's such a shortage in the first place, doesn't it?
That is a really good question. Why is that?
It's often called a leaky pipeline.
Hmm.
Basically, there aren't enough black students entering medical school to begin with, and then many of those who do graduate end up leaving California to pursue residencies in other states.
So we're losing them at both ends.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned Charles R. Drew, University of Medicine and Science, because they're one of only 4 historically black medical schools in the country and the only one on the West Coast.
You got it. And they're not just focused on increasing the number of black doctors. They're also committed to social justice and health equity. They're attracting students who want to make a real difference in underserved communities.
I was reading that they're ranked number 3 in the country for taking students from disadvantaged backgrounds and helping them become successful professionals. Talk about making a real impact.
It's not just about the numbers, it's about creating opportunities and building trust in communities that have historically been underserved and marginalized. It's recognizing that healthcare is not one size fits all and that different communities have different needs.
Okay, for our last deep dive today, we're going to tackle a very important issue, maternal health.
Yeah, this is a topic that deserves a lot more attention.
I completely agree. I was reading in California Black Media that black mothers in California have a maternal mortality rate that is 3 times higher than the state average. That's
Yeah.
a huge difference.
It is a very disturbing statistic, and it's not just about disparities in healthcare access or quality. It points to a much deeper problem, which is systemic racism.
You know, I remember reading a quote from Dana Sherrod of the California Coalition for Black Birth Justice. She said that even when you control for things like education and income, black women still face worse outcomes when it comes to pregnancy and childbirth. It's clear that racism is a major factor here.
It is. And California recently unveiled a new maternal health blueprint aimed at addressing this issue.
So they're trying to do something about it. That's good.
Right? The intentions are good, but the blueprint has actually been met with quite a bit of criticism.
Really? Why is that?
Well, a lot of advocates, including Dana Sherrod, are concerned that the blueprint doesn't adequately address the role of systemic racism and relies too heavily on individual solutions rather than tackling the systemic problems that are really at the root of this crisis. They're worried that it could actually end up harming Black and Indigenous communities.
How could a plan meant to help end up doing more harm?
Well, some of the criticisms are focused on the blueprint's lack of involvement from midwives. It tends to place blame on individual choices rather than acknowledge the systemic failures that contribute to these disparities. And, it's over-reliance on technology instead of investing in community-based support systems.
So it sounds like they're trying to fix a leaky faucet by telling people to just use less water.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. The takeaway here is that it's not enough to just have good intentions. We have to hold these types of initiatives accountable and make sure they're truly serving the communities they are meant to help.
I think that's a great place to wrap up part 1 of our deep dive.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground today, and it's clear that all of these issues are connected in some way. We're back for part 2 of our Southern California deep dive. It's interesting how these stories we've been talking about, they seem separate at first, but they all come back to this idea of community in a way.
You're right. From those local stores struggling to stay open to the need for more black doctors who understand the unique needs of their communities. It's all connected.
It really is. It shows how important it is to think, beyond our own individual experiences and consider the bigger picture. Speaking of which, let's go back to that California maternal health blueprint. I'm still trying to wrap my head around how a plan designed to help could potentially do more harm.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling. It
Yeah.
seems like the blueprint, while aiming to lower those maternal mortality rates, might actually be missing the mark by not fully addressing the systemic racism that Black women face in healthcare.
Exactly. And that's what advocates like Dana Sherrod are saying, right? They're worried that the blueprint puts too much emphasis on, individual responsibility and not enough on the systemic failures that are really contributing to these disparities. It's like trying to fix a leaky faucet by telling people to just use less water.
Right, you're not really solving the problem, you're just putting a Band-Aid on it.
Exactly. And in this case, that Band-Aid could actually make things worse by further marginalizing Black and Indigenous communities. It's important to remember that healthcare isn't, one size fits all.
That's a really good point.
Hmm.
Different communities have different needs, and we need solutions that are, tailored to those needs.
This kind of makes me think back to our conversation about the lack of Black doctors in California. Having more doctors who understand the specific experiences and challenges that Black women face, that could be a huge step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Representation matters, not just in terms of numbers, but also in terms of having doctors who bring those lived experiences and perspectives to their practice. Black doctors are more likely to understand those subtle cultural nuances and those unconscious biases that can affect the care Black women receive.
So, shifting gears a bit, what can we do as individuals to push for more equitable maternal health care in California? What actions can we take to make a real difference?
Well, first and foremost, stay informed. Read those articles. Listen to podcasts like this one. Do your own research. The more you know about the issues, the better equipped you'll be to advocate for change.
Knowledge is power, right? So, what else can we do? Supporting organizations like the California Coalition for Black Birth Justice, they're doing some amazing work, fighting for policy changes and advocating for the needs of Black mothers.
And what about Charles R. Drew University? They're playing a big role in training that next generation of Black doctors who will make a difference.
Right. Supporting institutions like CDU, whether it's through donations or volunteering your time, that's a great way to contribute to a more equitable future.
It's all about taking action.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it seems like a small action, it can make a difference.
Love that. Small ripples can create big waves, right? Now, before we get too serious here, let's take a little detour back to sports. Remember that Chargers game we were talking about, that victory over the Bengals?
Oh, yeah. What a game that was. I'm still thinking about that last-minute touchdown.
It was a nail-biter. That game really shows the importance of, resilience and never giving up, even when things are tough.
That's kind of like those local businesses we were talking about. Fighting to survive in this crazy retail world.
That's a great parallel. It's all about, adapting, being creative, and finding ways to overcome challenges. And speaking of challenges, let's go back to that upcoming election. It's going to be a big one with a lot at stake.
Definitely. And with California's unique voting process, with those extended voting periods and all that focus on verifying every ballot, every vote counts. But we've got to be patient and let the process do its thing.
Yeah, patience is key, especially in a world where everybody wants everything right now.
It's a good reminder that democracy takes time. And that's not a bad thing. It means our system is designed to be fair and accurate, even if it's not always the fastest.
Well said. So, as we get closer to Election Day, let's all make a promise to stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, stay patient.
Great advice. It's also crucial to stay informed about those issues we care about most, right? Whether it's healthcare, education, the economy, or anything else you're passionate about.
Because ultimately, it's up to us, the citizens, to hold our elected officials accountable, make sure they're truly representing us.
That's what democracy is all about. We, the people, have the power, right? But for now, we're going to take a quick break and come back with the final part of our deep dive. We're back for the final part of our deep dive into Southern California this week. Man, we've covered a lot of ground already, from the struggles of retail stores to the need for more Black doctors in our healthcare system.
It really has been a journey. We talked about voting, maternal health care, and even celebrated a Chargers victory.
What a whirlwind. That's what the deep dive is all about, though, right? We connect those dots, bring you the details, and help you understand this crazy world a little bit better.
Speaking of navigating this world, remember all those store closures? It makes you realize we all need to be able to adapt, not just as shoppers, but as a whole society.
It's like we're on this massive shopping spree, but the rules keep changing on us. We got to be smart, support those local shops, and maybe even rethink our Black Friday game plan this year.
Absolutely. Maybe this year we can skip those big box store deals and find unique gifts from smaller businesses instead. It's a win-win. We support our communities and maybe discover something special we wouldn't have found otherwise. What do you think?
I love that idea. It's about being more aware of where we spend our money, you
Yeah.
know, making choices that are good for everyone and help build a better future.
Exactly. That same idea applies to everything we've been talking about, whether it's speaking up for better maternal health care or supporting those future Black doctors or even just staying informed and engaged in politics. Every little thing we do makes a
It's
difference.
like that butterfly effect they talk
Oh,
about,
yeah.
right? A butterfly flaps its wings and it can cause a hurricane on the other side of the world.
It's a powerful image for sure. It reminds us that we all have the power to change the world. So, as we wrap up our deep dive, I want to challenge you. What's one thing, big or small, that you can do this week to make a positive impact?
Maybe it's calling your representative about something you're passionate about or volunteering in your community. You could even just talk with friends or family about what we discussed today.
Those are all great ideas. Remember, change doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. And it starts with each of us doing our part.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive today. Remember, knowledge is power, so stay curious, stay engaged, and keep those brains